Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Career Launcher. Welcome to Career Launcher's YT channel for MBA aspirants. Continuing our series on passages based on business and economy, today I have chosen a passage from The Economist. It's about 477 words long. Let me just put up my chat and then I will show you the passage. Okay. I'll show you each slide for about a minute because I don't think there's too much content in each slide. And then I'll summarize the passage as usual and we'll look at the questions. Now, when you read, you're supposed to read and summarize the passage properly. If you summarize the passage properly, you can get at least 3 out of 4 questions. You can guess the right answer because your summary has been good. You know what are the main points. All right, let's start. All right, are you done with the first slide? Let's move to the next slide. I'll give you again a minute, though this slide is even shorter than the first one. Done reading the slide? There's just a little more on the next slide. All right, we're done with that. Let's quickly go back. First slide, what does the author say? That China. So he's basically it is a series of articles which were published under the elephant versus the dragon. This one says China overtook Japan to become the world's second largest economy in 2010, a title that Japan had held for 40 years, and it went on to become the world's biggest manufacturer, dominant buyer, a holder of 3 trillion foreign exchange reserves in terms of dollars. Its penetration of foreign markets was manufacturing markets was dubbed the China shock, and its accumulation of foreign assets a savings glut. Will the world see such a rise again? Here is where India comes in. India hopes so. In 2025, it could overtake Japan to become the second biggest economy in Asia and the fourth largest in the world. India's population is already bigger than China's, its economy is likely to grow faster, and its leaders want its GDP to reach $5 trillion dollars by 2028, its exports of goods and services to reach 1 trillion a piece by 2030. So, this is what India hopes. It hopes to rise in the global economy like China did. India also aims to benefit from the geopolitical tension that China's rise has provoked. Manufacturers, scared by the Sino American tension, see India as a potential refuge. Canalys, a market research firm, says Apple will produce a fifth of its iPhone in India by 2025. Next, the author asks the question: so, will India repeat the China shock? According to the author, no, because the scale and style of its development. In 2010, Japan's economy was still over 8% of the world GDP, but its clout has diminished. By the time India overtakes it in a year, Japan's share of the world GDP will be less than 4%. So, number one is the scale and style of India's development will make it difficult for India to repeat the China shock. Second, India's workforce remains only three quarters of the size of China, partly because it includes so few women. Social trends can change, but on some projections, India's labor force will not surpass China's until 2050s. And even in the 2050s, India will share for a smaller share of the global workforce than China does today. Therefore, because of the scale and style of its development, the size of its workforce, these two factors make it harder for India to become the world's workshop. If it meets the government's 1 trillion target, its goods export will still be only 3% of the global total. South Korea achieved that percentage 10 years ago. So, India's exports of services are more impressive. So, on the manufacturing side, India is not that great. Its exports of services are more impressive. Its share of the global total could reach 6% by 2030 from 4.6 in 2023. Multinationals are keeping legal and HR work in house but moving it offshore, setting up global capability centers in India. That will threaten some jobs in the West, but those centers, the global capability centers, will employ only 3.4 million people by 2028. Because of all these reasons, the author says in India, shock is not likely, nor is another savings glut. India's in For that to happen, what has to happen? India's investments at present, this is the situation. India's investments tends to exceed its own savings rate. So, large net capital outflows are unlikely. It needs a large net capital outflow, but because its investment exceeds its saving rate, large net capital outflows are unlikely. Capital will be attracted to India's liquid stock market and the inclusion of its bonds in global indices. So, yes, India will rise, but its rise will be less spectacular than China's, and less likely to provoke a backlash. China's rise provoked a backlash. India's rise is less likely to provoke a backlash. All right, I'll give you 40 seconds per question. Quickly answer the questions. Which of the following statements capture the essence of the passage? I'll read out the options to you. Your time starts now. For this, for the main point, essence, summary of the main point, you don't need to go back to the passage, right? India is poised for significant growth and global influence and is likely to overtake China's transformative China shock due to improvements in scale, development style, and economic dynamics. While India is poised for significant growth and global influence, it is unlikely to replicate China's transformative China shock due to differences in scale, development style, and economic dynamics. Or, while India is poised for significant growth and global influence, the same first part, it can never emulate China's transformative China shock due to inferior scale development style and economic dynamics. The stark differences in scale, development style, and economic dynamics put India at a disadvantage compared to China in terms of global influence and growth. Which is the right answer? All right, your time. I hope you got. Let me see. All right, let's see. India's poised for significant growth and global influence is likely to overtake, the author says, unlikely. So this is wrong. While India is poised for significant growth and global influence, it is unlikely to replicate the China shock. Why? Because there are differences in scale, there are differences in development style, and other economic dynamics. This sums up the main point best. Let's see where C and D go wrong. While India is poised for significant growth and global influence, it can never emulate. It says unlikely, which is not the same as never emulate. The stark differences put India at a disadvantage, but it doesn't cover what the author says. In certain things, it is better, but what are the disadvantages? What are the other problems? It doesn't say. Therefore, B is the correct answer. D is a little too vague. All right, question 2. Which of the following most accurately describes China shock? If you remember, China shock was mentioned in the very first paragraph, right? Here, China overtook Japan to become the world's largest economy. It went on to become the world's biggest manufacturer, dominant buyer of commodities, and holder of 3 trillion foreign exchange reserves. Its penetration of foreign manufacturing markets was dubbed as China shock. What is China shock? China's penetration of foreign manufacturing markets, its buying of commodities, and holding foreign exchange reserves, right? That was what was termed as China shock. Let's look at which option does that. The significant and unwelcome economic disruption is that the author say that caused by China's rise as a dominant manufacturing powerhouse, leading to downturns in the global economic. We're not sure of these two. The economic hegemony of China, which resulted in a shift in global trade hub from Europe and America to Asia. It's only China. The other countries were not there. It, in fact, overtook one of another Asian superpower. China's rapid rise as an economic power, which led to its unchallenged global dominance. China's rapid rise as a dominant manufacturing powerhouse, leading to global shifts in global trade, production, and financial flows. The key is its dominant manufacturing powerhouse, how it went through the foreign bastion, how it held its own, how it dominated. That is the main part. And shifts in trade, production, and financial flows. Therefore, D is the correct answer. Good. Question 3. It can be inferred that an India shock is not inevitable, that it's not. India shock is not inevitable, the author says. It's unlikely. Why? Why is an India shock not inevitable? Why is it unlikely? Is the question. India's workforce and export capacity are expected to grow more slowly compared to China's, limiting its ability to replicate the same scale of global disruption. Is this why? Is this only because of workforce and export capacity? Let's see. India's development strategy focuses more on services and inward investment rather than manufacturing and large scale export driven growth like China's. But true, maybe, but is that why it is not? It doesn't explain why that does not make India shock not inevitable. Why this makes India does not make India shock unlikely. This just says that its development strategy is different. So what? Even with a different development strategy, it can still cause disruption, right? But it hasn't explained. So this just mentions some point. India's rise. Why is an India shock not inevitable? India's rise is constrained. It's limited by demographic trends, fewer women in the workforce, lower goods export potential, and differences in investment and savings dynamics, because the investment is internal investment is more, the savings is less. Second, demographic trends, less women in the workforce. So they're all these reasons together, they are the challenges because of which India shock is unlikely, right? India's economic model prioritizes steady domestic growth over aggressive expansion, but again hasn't expressed anything about why this will not make India, create an India shock, create a global impact. Okay, so 3 is the correct answer. Which of the following is an assumption implicit in the author's argument? The author has said China shock happened, India shock is unlike SCX. Huh. India shock is unlikely. Why is the India shock unlikely? He has given factors. So the assumptions are based on those factors. Size of the workforce is not a significant factor in a country's growth potential. No, the author says India's workforce is still too small, and he has mentioned the workforce as a significant factor. So this goes against what the author has said. This cannot be an assumption. Internal investment and moderate saving rates generate larger net capital inflows. He says internal investments and high savings rate. India does not have that. Therefore, India will not have larger net capital outflow. So, this is also wrong. Scale of manufacturing drives disruptions, and if India does not have the scale, China had it, and therefore China could dominate. India should focus, cannot be an assumption. Therefore, C is the correct answer. I hope you got that right. All right. Last question of the set. Based on the passage, which of the following can be most reasonably concluded about India's future global economic role? So, this is based on the author's main point. What did it say about India's global economic role? It's going to rise, it's going to have significant influence, not like China's, and it's not likely to have a kind of backlash that China provoked, right? India's economic rise will likely depend more on service exports and strategic investments, right? India's rise as an economic power will provoke significant geopolitical tensions, he says. No. India's labor force will propel it. No, it will still be small. India's economic trajectory will mirror that of South Korea. He didn't say that. Therefore, the correct answer is option A. So, this was a passage which looked difficult, but if we get the main point, it is not that difficult, right? Join me again next Saturday at 1 p.m. Any questions, any doubts, do ask me. If you have any questions related to our courses, call the number that's on your screen. I will see you again on Saturday at 1 p.m. Until then, bye bye.